Hello and welcome to this lecture, and in this lecture we will learn how to actually go ahead and create our very first Flask website. So the first thing which you need to do is that even before you start creating websites, you need to have certain directories in place which are going to together form your website. So the first thing which you need to do here is that you need to open up the terminal, or you could also type in cmd, which is command prompt. And once you open up this command prompt, what you need to do is that you actually need to make a directory on your desktop. And by directory, I just mean that you actually need to go ahead and create a folder which is going to contain all the files related to your website. So in order to do that, first let's go to the desktop. So let's type in cd desktop. And here, once you are on the desktop, let's make a directory and let's name that directory as Flask site. So for that, you just need to type in mkdir Flask site. Now you could also do this by just right clicking here and creating a new folder, but for the sake of simplicity, I am just doing this with the help of command prompt. And the folder is actually created on my desktop right over here. So this thing right here is my folder, which is going to consist of all the files. Now the next thing which we need to do here is that we actually need to go ahead and install Flask and also set up a virtual environment. Now the reason for setting up the virtual environment is because we actually need to make a separate environment so that the other projects in your computer do not interfere with each other. So what we need to do here is that you need to type in virtual env, but even before doing that, we need to go to the directory which is Flask site. So you simply type in cd Flask site, and now to create a virtual environment, you type in virtual env and let's name the environment as env. So this is actually going to create a new virtual environment for you, and it is going to take a little bit of time for this thing to create the virtual environment. But as soon as this thing is done, your virtual environment will be ready, and we will learn how to access that virtual environment so that we could have our project in that particular environment, which is isolated from any of the project which we have on this desktop. So depending upon your computer speed, it is going to take a while for this to happen, for this to install. So I'm going to pause this video and I will return when this thing is done installing. Okay, so now the virtual environment is set up, and in order to check if the environment is really set up, what you could do is that you could go into that environment. So you could type in cd env. So that is going to go into the environment folder, and to check contents of this environment folder, you could type in dir, which is going to give you the directory structure of that folder. So as you could see, there are certain things, and there is one directory which is called as scripts. So in order to activate the virtual environment, you actually need to go inside this script directory. So simply type in cd scripts, and that is actually going to redirect you to the scripts directory. Now again, if you type in dir, as you could see, there are actually a bunch of files in this environment folder, and within this environment folder, within the scripts folder, we have these files which will allow us to activate the virtual environment. So as you could see, there is a file which is called as activate, and we just need to open that file, or we just need to run that file so that we will be able to have a virtual environment activated. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm simply going to type in activate, hit enter, and as you could see, as soon as I hit activate, it actually gave a small env thing right here to the leftmost side of the window which says env, which means that now we are in a virtual environment. So the next thing which we need to do is that we actually need to navigate back to our main file folder, which is Flask site. So let's type in cd ... and cd ... one more time. So right now we are back to the Flask directory, or the Flask site directory. And also you could notice that as the virtual environment is enabled, we have this env sign at the left. So once we have this thing, we are pretty much good to go. Now our next task is to basically generate a few more directories which we are going to need along the duration of this course. So the first thing which you need to do even before doing that is you actually need to install Flask. So in order to install Flask, what you do is that you first go back to the Flask site directory, and right here you need to type in pip install Flask, and that is actually going to install Flask for you. So it is going to download all the files which are required by Flask, then it is going to install the required packages, and once it is done, it is actually going to show you this kind of thing which says successfully installed. So once this thing is done, that means you are successful in installing Flask. Now if you actually want to confirm that Flask is properly installed, what you could do is that you could type in Python, and in here you could type in from Flask import Flask. So make sure that you import Flask, that is Flask with a capital F, from Flask which is having a small f. So when you do that, there should be no problem, and this means that we have successfully installed Flask. Now in order to get back to this path right here, you simply need to press Ctrl C and you will be back to this path right here. Now as I said, in this folder which is Flask site, we actually need to lay out a directory structure to save different files related to our website. So what we do here is that we create two things or two directories. The first one would be the static directory, which is going to hold the static files like images and everything like that, and another folder which is going to be called as the templates folder, which are going to hold the HTML templates. So let's first create the static folder. So let's type in mkdir static, hit enter, and now let's create the next folder which is called as templates. So let's type in mkdir templates, and if you're confused right now like why this kind of folders are actually used, you will understand the significance of all of these later on as we move along the duration of this course, so you don't need to worry about it right now. So once you have these two directories, let's go into the static directory. So let's type in cd static, hit enter, and in here we are going to create three more directories. One is going to be for CSS, one is going to be for JavaScript, and the other one is going to be for images. So let's type in mkdir CSS for CSS, mkdir JS for JavaScript, and mkdir images if you actually want to include some images in your website. So once this thing is done, let's open up the Flask site folder, and as you could see right here, you now have three folders. The first one is the virtual environment folder, which basically has all the files associated with the virtual environment. So you don't need to worry about it right now because we will not be using that directory. Now if you go to static, as you could see, now we have three folders here: CSS, images, and JS. And the third one, or the third directory, is the templates directory, which is actually going to hold the HTML templates which we will be using to create our websites. So that's it for this lecture, and in the next lecture what we are going to do is that we are basically going to write in a program or a Flask code which will allow us to display hello world on the web page. So that's it for this lecture, and I hope you guys were able to understand how the directory structure of a website in Flask is laid out, and how to actually go ahead, download Flask and set up Flask so that you will be ready to write your very first website. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.